What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the VQ podcast. My name is Johnny D. Nguyen, and today my guest is a manifestation and success coach and the founder of the Manifestement podcast. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So first and foremost, I kind of wanted to share that how I came across your profile, or at least most recently again, was I don't know if you know, but I worked back in the mid 2000s. I actually got my start working in pageants, in on the event production side, and I happened to work on the Miss Vietnam Global pageant that you were the winner of. So from I wanted to start the question about, tell me what motivated you actually to join that particular pageant at that time.
Yeah, so this was back in 2007. I was 17, senior in high school, and I heard about Miss Vietnam Global. And growing up, I had a lot of my mom's friends encourage me to đi thi hoa hậu, and I didn't know what that meant. But I started learning more about it because there was, the winner of the pageant in 2006, she was from Seattle too. And so that was pretty inspiring to me. And I think it was more out of curiosity. I wanted to know what it was like. I wanted to experience it for myself. Also, there was a cash prize of $10,000. And growing up, I don't know how much you know about my story, but my parents immigrated here. We struggled a lot financially. And I thought that that $10,000 could really help my family. And I was going off to college. And so there were a number of different things that motivated me, definitely the curiosity. And I thought that winning that money could mean a lot for my family. And again, going off to college, that would help tremendously too. So that was what motivated me.
And where exactly did you grow up?
I grew up in Seattle,
Okay.
but I lived in Seattle up until maybe I would say at some point during elementary, I moved to the South. So it's Kent, Washington is where I moved up. It's about 20-30 minutes away from Seattle.
Would you say there's a lot of Asians in your area, or Vietnamese,
Yeah,
or not at
definitely.
all?
A very
They're
big Vietnamese population here. Yeah.
awesome. So joining the pageant, would you say, was it well known in the area, or like was it known to your community that you were going to be participating in it?
I didn't really announce it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, my family, we didn't have a lot of money. So my parents didn't actually get to go to Vegas, which was where it was hosted. They had enough to pay for my flight and my entry fee and all of that. I didn't really announce it to anyone. Interestingly, though, my aunt and my uncle, they attended the show. They didn't know I was in it, but when they got to Vegas, they saw all the pictures of the contestants and they saw my picture and they're like, "Oh, they called my mom and they're like, why didn't you tell us that she was competing?" So it wasn't something that I was sharing with everybody.
If there was one takeaway from the pageant, what would that be?
So again, my aunt and my uncle were there. They were keeping my family updated. And I remember when they called my name, it was a very surreal moment. Everything happened really quickly, but I do remember that they came on stage. My aunt handed me her phone, which was like the flip phone back then, and it was my mom on the other line. And I actually have this picture because a photographer captured it. I think that was actually in the newspaper too, but I kept that picture because you could see me, you could see my emotion. I was crying with my mom. And I mean, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I do remember saying something like, "We did it, mom," and it was a very special moment. And so that moment for me, what it meant for me, I feel like it was a turning point in my life because it was the first time where I was able to reach a goal that I had set out to reach.
That's awesome.
I think it inspired me to look at the other goals that I inspired me to look at other dreams and other aspirations that I had for myself. And I shared this a while ago. I said that moment was so special to me because up until that point, my mom and I had cried so much together because of hardship, because of challenges. But that was the first time that we cried because of something that was joyful. Like we were crying happy tears for the first time. So that was very special for me.
So, being that you won the title, how did you adjust to dealing with extra attention? Because obviously, not just from the there's media there, and then there's everyone now. Like you said, you didn't make an announcement that you're gonna to your community that you're gonna be there, and now all of a sudden you have this title. Like, was there take us through your emotions during that time?
Ooh, it's been a long time. Again, I was 17. I was really young. I do remember going on YouTube and seeing comments. I remember someone said, "Oh, it's so rigged. She bought the title." And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my gosh, if they only knew my upbringing and how poor we were."
I feel like that's always like the default like way to troll someone is like, oh, it's got to be rigged.
I don't know. So that was difficult for me because I never experienced that before. So I think for me, the way I dealt with it was I just didn't look anymore. I was like, okay, clearly I can read these comments and feel bad and,
Mhm.
let it affect me, or I can just not read it. And so, quite honestly, even now, I don't I just don't pay it any attention because I know how it will make me feel. I think no matter how confident you are, or no matter how good of a mental state you're in, if you keep on taking in information like that, it will get to you. And so I try not I try not to read it,
Mhm.
or just yeah, it's just not something that I want to spend my time on.
Now, when you left Las Vegas though, and you came back to Washington, um, what are some memorable moments from that? Were you integrated in the community? Were they like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you? Like, walk us through what happened after Vegas.
So, as I mentioned to you earlier, I was a senior getting ready. So, let's see, when was the pageant? It was, I think, during the summertime. So, I had already graduated from high school. I was getting ready to go to University of Washington. So a lot was happening. I do remember going to a lot of like fashion shows. Back then, they had a lot of fashion shows at like casinos. And so I do remember flying out a lot over the weekend for that, while at the same time adjusting and moving out on my own, uh, just getting ready for this new chapter in my life. And so I just remember it being like a lot like a whirlwind, and everything was just happening very quickly. But I loved it though, because I felt like it was almost like this double life, because during the
Hmm.
week I was in school and I was getting that full college experience living on my own. But then over the weekend, it was like the glitz and the glam and like dress up and going on stage. Like that was really fun. I guess another reason why I wanted to compete in the pageant is I've always really enjoyed being on stage. Like in high school, middle school, I was always up for like the talent show. I like being on stage, and so that was also something that I didn't
Was it
mention
singing?
earlier.
Was it dancing? What was your thing to showcase and to perform on stage?
Singing and dancing. Yeah, I love.
Both. Okay.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I still feel pretty shy about my singing. I think that I'm a better dancer than I am singer, but it was something that I did growing up. Like I didn't have a bedroom growing up, and I just remember sneaking into my mom's room every day because she had this big vanity mirror, and I would just sing and dance and pretend. So when uh, I entered middle school, high school, they had talent shows, and I would sign up, and yeah, it was fun.
The stage was definitely a special place for me as a child, so I share that feeling as you for sure.
What are you interested in, or what's your
Singing.
passion?
I
Singing?
sang ever
Awesome.
since a little bit about that. I sang ever since I was in kindergarten all the way up through senior year. I was in everything that was related to music, any choir, anything I would do. It was my way to bond with my father at the time in my
Mm,
teens. Um, the weekends we would sing karaoke for his friends, and that was how I started developing my relationship with the culture, with the
mm,
Vietnamese identity by singing these really sad ballad songs and things like that, and but not really, but these lyrics are not applicable to conversation, right? So like I would learn these cool these cool songs, but my Vietnamese was beyond elementary, so really transfer over any of that, except for the simple fact that I was able to at least entertain and able to bond with and his friends and be the entertainment, right? For because they, that was for most families, it was the weekend get-togethers, and
Yeah.
yo culture is extremely strong. So
I love that. I think that, Vietnamese music, it's so deep, like I think the lyrics and just, yeah,
well,
I'm trying to picture you right now as a young child singing those songs.
I would say there that era, because we're family was we're immigrants, came over here after the war, and a lot of the songs that I learned from Southern Vietnamese side had a lot of meaning. It was sad because it was a sad period, right? It's the songs of today, current day V-pop. It's a lot more brighter and fun because
Mhm.
it's a different kind of atmosphere. But I think for every Vietnamese lives outside of Vietnam, it is very important to really understand the meaning behind a lot of those generational music.
Yeah.
You'll see why a program like Paris by Night, a program like Asia meant so much to the diaspora community, because it was I talk about this on my podcast, but there was, after the country was broken up, the music from the South was actually destroyed. It was meant the government did not want to have that were composed during that time to live on, because it was
Mm.
about patriotic music and not necessarily about the war times or all the losses that occurred during the emotional trauma during that time. So if it wasn't for the leadership and the vision of Van Lai from Paris by Night and other leaders like himself, that music probably would have went away as well. So going to be a documentary, I believe, that's going to talk about the rise of Paris by Night, and how
Mm.
something that's near and dear as I go through the journey here at VQ to learn about our history. And just one piece of it is the music identity.
When does the documentary come out?
It's still in the works. It's
Oh,
still in the
okay.
works. Yeah. But kind of to our conversation now, I want to learn a little bit more about your professional career, because fresh from that that experience with at a young age already in high school, and then going getting all that attention, and then going to work for two pretty massive companies, massive, right? Um, Apple being one of them, and then also Meta. So take us through what was entry level into corporate America.
Yeah, so oh, sorry, my son's coughing. So I graduated from the University of Washington, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit conflicted because I've always been passionate about showbiz and entertainment. And I wanted to explore that more, but I also wanted something stable, and I
Yeah.
wanted more security. I think a lot of it just comes from seeing how much my parents sacrificed, and it was a point in my life where I had to make a decision of whether I wanted to do something that I felt passionate about back then, or to take that traditional path that's going to provide more of that security and stability. And I took that more traditional route. So I started my career in consulting. I started as a consulting analyst at Accenture, and I moved my way up to consultant. And that was great. Once I loved everything about it, there definitely were a lot of moments where it was just really stressful. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I actually
Yeah.
moved from Seattle to Houston to start my consulting career. So, also very lonely. I learned so much in a short period of time. Fast forward a little bit, I had my son. I was pregnant pretty early, I would say. I mean, maybe not compared to my mom. She had my brother when she was 16. I was 24 when I had my son,
Hmm.
which I feel is pretty young, right? I feel like a lot of my friends even now don't have kids yet. But anyway, I had my son, and I had to reevaluate my career because as a consultant, you might be placed on a traveling project. You just don't know. You don't have that stability in terms of having a very consistent schedule. And so I had to make another decision, and I decided to get into HR and recruiting because I was able to work from home. So I was very grateful to Accenture for allowing me to make that pivot. Did recruiting for a bit at Accenture, felt like I needed something different. I wasn't didn't feel fulfilled. And at the time, I didn't know exactly why. I thought maybe I just needed a new environment. I thought I needed to just break into a different industry. I also just felt like, I mean, I won't get into that actually, but
Mhm.
there were things
Mhm.
that led me to wanting to try something different. So I applied to Meta. I didn't get it my first time. Second time, though, I was able to land a role as a PhD recruiter. I think I was there for a year and a half, just say that a year and a half. And then I took a little sabbatical because my dad was struggling a lot with his health. And I think it was also the point in my life where I was just starting to question my purpose and it didn't feel aligned and took some time off, competed in a pageant, which I think that we'll talk about at some point, competed for Mrs. Vietnam World, which is the preliminary to Mrs. World. That was a lot of fun. After that was when I started my job at Apple, doing the same thing. I was a recruiter there as well.
So at Apple, I mean that I guess just for someone like myself, I've always I can imagine what based on the products they put out, like they're such a sense of there's a very specialized culture that's there. So was it? I guess what was it like working company like Apple?
I felt very fortunate. I was intimidated when I first started because Apple is a really great company. A lot of people want to work there. And they were also paying me very generously. So it was also, again, like a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Overall, I had a really good experience. If I ever went back to corporate, which I don't imagine that I will do because I love what I'm doing now, but if that was ever the case that I went back to corporate, it would definitely be, I would love to go back to Apple. I think it's a really great company. The people there are so smart, but humble at the same time. And I just love Apple. I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook, right? I have all the things. I think that they do a good job.
How long were you there, and then ultimately led you to exit?
Yeah, I was there for less than a year. So I started as a contractor actually, and I was in that role for 4 months or so. And then my manager offered me a full time position, which I was so grateful for. I was making multiple six figures. It was a huge deal to me. I felt like this was the moment that I had been working so hard for. But I'll be honest, I had a lot of internal conflict because part of me just still didn't feel like this was my purpose. I didn't feel that sense of fulfillment. The other part of me was saying, you should be grateful. You should continue to work here. You know, don't leave behind a good thing to go chase something that's not 100% certain. Like I just didn't really have a plan. But I ultimately decided to leave because even though I was very grateful for the compensation and the benefits and all of that, I feel like there's more to life than just chasing money. And I also feel like there are other ways to make money. Uh, it was also around the time frame when my dad was very, very ill. My dad passed the end of last year. And I remember just spending all that time with him in the hospital. He was in and out of the hospital. And, you know, whenever we go to the ER, we're there for like 6 to 8 hours. And I think just being with him made me reflect a lot on life and how short it is. And, you know, my dad was older, but the reality is like, how do I know that I have next year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, right? And if I am fortunate to live a long time, I feel like, don't I want to do something that is impactful? Not to say that what I was doing wasn't impactful, but meaningful to me. And also just want to enjoy my day to day and not just being so fixated on like getting the promotion or moving up and just constantly chasing this moving target. And so a lot of those things kind of played a role in my decision. And I think it was at a time where I felt more confident in my ability to go off on my own. So yeah, all of those things. It's a lot. I'm trying to think back to that period and, figuring out like what were the factors, what were the things that influenced me. I would say those are the things that influenced me the most.
Okay. Would you say, right? So basically, after you made the decision to leave Apple, that was when your journey began for the Mrs. World competition?
It was after Facebook or Meta. It was after leaving Meta. I took a little bit of a sabbatical, and during that time, I wanted to do something for myself. I was just not in a good mental state because I was really stressed with work. Well, before I had left Facebook, I was really stressed with work. My dad wasn't doing very well. I was just questioning like life and happiness and fulfillment and purpose and all of that. And it was also a period in my life where I felt really burnt out trying to juggle my career and being a mom. So for the first like 3, 4 years of being a mom, I just didn't know how to I didn't know what balance meant. Like I didn't consciously create balance in my life because it was just like survival mode for me. I don't think a lot of people talk about like the pressure. Well, I do think that people are talking about it a lot more now, but as a mom, it sometimes feels like people expect you to work like you don't have kids and to raise kids like you don't have work. And it was a lot for me to manage, and I think I got to a point where I just wanted to do something for myself. Like I wanted to just have like an identity outside of my family. And even now, when I say that, I know people will misinterpret that or like that, oh, that's selfish or whatever it is. But I think over the years, I've just learned like if I don't make the effort to pour into myself, who is going to do that? And if um, I don't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to show up and take care of the people around me and be able to show up as the best version of myself. So that was like the first time in my life where I said, you know what, I need to do something for myself. And pageantry, it wasn't actually something that I was going out and looking for. It was a friend. I had a friend who told me about the pageant, and it was kind of like that perfect timing where I'm like, you know what? Let me do that. I've always enjoyed pageants. So after just a little bit of context, so after Miss Vietnam World, I became very passionate about pageantry. I did it out of curiosity, like I said, but once I got that experience, I realized that pageantry, there's so much more to it than people can see. There's a lot of things that happen off stage in terms of like personal development and getting to know yourself better. And I really like that. I've always been really big on personal development. And so I actually competed in a lot of pageants after that, which I didn't win, but I still really enjoyed it. And so it carried with me like the passion for it. And so when I learned about this pageant for married women, I'm like, oh, like very interesting. Didn't know that this existed. And so that's kind of how it came about.
Now, there's so much years has passed between the first time you won and then kind of entering into this seems to be much more of a, a, a wider, more internationally recognized pageant. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's the longest standing pageant for married women. It was founded by David Marmel in 1983 or 1984. And it's always rated as like the best pageant for married women, which I didn't know. Again, I heard about this through a friend and I did my research and it felt really legit. So I said, okay, I'm gonna do it.
I know just even competing at these level at these pageants, there's a lot that goes into it. But like, did you think that you would essentially repeat history again and and take home the crown for the second time in your pageant career?
I think I had some confidence because I've competed in pageants before, but I never go into anything thinking like, oh, it's going to happen. Or like, I always tell people it's not about being certain that it will happen. It's just going into it knowing that it's possible. Like, I thought that it was possible that I could win, not that it was like, or like that would happen. Right. Um, it's interesting because when I was standing on stage, it was final two, and they called Mrs. South Africa as the first runner up. I actually thought they called her as the winner. And so you can see me on stage, like congratulating her, like giving her a hug. And then people around me were like, no, it's you. And I always, whenever I see that image, it's like, or that footage, it's, I don't, it's very special because like I said, you go into something, you don't know for sure. You just think that it's possible. If I didn't think it was possible, I don't think that I would join. I know some people are like, oh, I do it for the experience. I think I'm going to win, but I just do it for the experience. I'll be honest, like for me, I felt like there was a possibility. And when it does happen, it's like a surreal moment. It's like a dream come true. It was something that I was working very hard towards. It was yeah, I'll just say like when vision actualizes, it's very surreal. I guess to answer your question, no, I didn't think like, oh, it was 100% certain that history would repeat itself. I just felt like, I think there's a chance.
That's quite a it's quite a record to have. And
Well,
congratulations on.
actually, Donnie, let me just say that I've lost a lot of pageants. So,
Mhm.
it's really important to call
Mhm.
out because I don't want people to think like, oh, every pageant she
Right.
joins. Like, I think I've lost like 6 pageants. I've competed multiple times in Miss Washington USA, which is the preliminary to Miss USA, Miss Universe. Lost many times, made top 5, didn't make semifinals one year. Like, it's just all over the board. I competed in Miss Texas USA when I was living in Houston. And so I don't want people to think like I have this amazing track record because I've lost more pageants that I've won. But the ones that I won, I feel very fortunate. I feel very blessed. So yeah, I just want to say that I don't want people to think it's like, oh, 3 out of 3. No, it's not.
Now, we talked a lot about overcoming, or just so much that goes into one's decision to join a pageant, and then what you learn through going what a girl will go through it, right? So, what advice would you give to a girl in high school right now that is on the fence about wanting to join or compete in a pageant? What would you say to her in terms of what it would do for her?
So like I said, there's a lot that goes on off stage behind the scenes. Everything from preparation, not and I'm not just talking about your gown and your walk. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but a lot of it is the mental preparation. It's building up your own self-confidence so that when you're on stage, you can present yourself with confidence. It's getting clear on like who you are, what do you stand for, what's important to you. The defining moment of every pageant is the interview. Well, I won't say every pageant, but for most pageants, it's the interviews. And it's not just the onstage interview that you see, it's the private interviews with the judges. And so to prepare for those interviews, you have to know yourself. At least in that moment when you're competing, you have to know who you are, what's important to you, why are you doing this? And I think that was the most valuable aspect of competing because it really helped me with my interviewing. I think in terms of interviewing, it's you have to be able to formulate, you know, how you feel and put that into words in a way that's very concise because your interviews are really a couple of minutes with every judge. And so that helped me a lot. So I would say there's a lot of personal development that people don't uh, realize when it comes to pageantry. And I think outside of that, you make a lot of friends. I have friends all over the world now. I mean, we're not like best friends. We don't, hang out all the time, but I do think there's this bond that you have because you went through this experience together. And so, sisterhood, this is what I say the 3 S's of pageantry is sisterhood, self, which is the self growth, self development, and the other is service. So, when you compete in a pageant, you have to think about what are the causes that you care about? What do you stand for? And I think that's really important. I believe that I believe to live a fulfilling life, it has to be beyond you. It has to be more than just what you want. It's how you contribute to society, to your community, to the world. I think that's
I want to dive into your success coaching background now. So after winning the pageant and then kind of that whole, we really got a good understanding of that. Like, so take us through what does it mean to be a manifestation and success coach? Like,
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of context. I went through a divorce in 2020. This was after I this was after Mrs. World. This was when I crowned Mrs. World 2020. It came as a shock to a lot of people because from the pictures and just from the outside, everything seemed great. But the truth is, there were a lot of things that were happening behind closed doors, which I think is really important for people to remember is that people are not always going to put their whole life out there for you to see. They also um, want some privacy when it comes to things. And so there was things that I was going through in my marriage and my personal life. So I went through a divorce. And with that said, my husband and I, we did rekindle our relationship a year. We were a year apart for a year. But anyway, during that time, though, it was a very reflective period for me. I felt like it was a very low point in my life, not just because of the divorce, but again, my father was still struggling a lot, and I was helping him through. Um, yeah, I was just helping him with his appointments, and it just felt like a very chaotic time in my life and trying to navigate co-parenting during the pandemic, all the things. And so I just started to look inward. I had a lot of questions about life and about love, about happiness, about purpose, like all questions I had. And I think it's really important to start asking questions because if you ask the questions, you're eventually going to get the answer. So I started reading books, I started, watching videos and seeking answers. And it was through seeking those answers, integrating what I was learning, applying, these different principles and concepts, I started to see my life shift. And at some point during this journey of mine, I was thinking how valuable this information is and how I want to be able to share this with people because it felt like a hidden secret, right? I felt like, why am I now just learning this? Why do they not teach this in school? And so I became pretty passionate about wanting to become a coach and to share this information with other people and help them to get out of that low point or to at least strive for more, believe that there's more to life than what we've been taught. So that's a little bit of context. And then the question around what does it mean to be a manifestation success coach? I think when people think about manifestation, they think about like manifesting more money, manifesting the love of your life, and all these things. And there is that part of it. But when you go on this journey, what you ultimately realize is your self-worth, and you realize that you actually don't need any of this stuff that you think you want to manifest. It's great to experience, and you can certainly do that. But I think it's this realization you are whole and you are worthy just as you are, and you don't need anything else to fill this void that you to yeah, you don't need anything or anyone to uh, fill this void that you might feel. So that's the biggest realization and moment for me when I was on my journey. But that's not to say that life is not meant to be enjoyed. I still have goals that I want to achieve. There's still things I want to experience. But I think this journey, in a lot of ways, is about self worth and about finding purpose and fulfillment and living your life on your terms. And just being able to live a life where you're enjoying your day to day and not just striving to reach a destination. And so that's what I help people through is that whole journey. It's everything that I went through, what helped me, what information helped me, how did I get to a point in my life now where I feel that sense of fulfillment, where I do enjoy my day to day and I'm not just reaching a goal just to reach a goal. That's what my ultimate goal as a coach is to get people to that sense of freedom and fulfillment.
you also have a podcast, and I'm a listener of it. So the Manifestment podcast with Jennifer Lee. So take us through what led you to create that podcast, and what is the whole show about.
Yeah, so I started the Manifestment podcast because I feel like with Instagram, TikTok, now we have threads, short format content is great, but it's really hard to get to go deep with some of these concepts and principles. And I feel like the way that you're able to I think the only way for you to actually see a transformation and see results is if you commit to this information and you not only learn it, but you apply it. And I felt like podcast was a really great platform and like way for me to share this information with people who are committed and they want to learn. And it's not just like this quick hit, but it's more like, hey, let's really talk about this. Let's dive deeper. Because I do think that it can be challenging to explain a lot of these things in just like a 1 minute video. And so podcast is really great to go deep. And I also just love it because I feel like the people that you attract, like the people who are, again, committed to this, they appreciate it. They actually listen to the whole thing. I feel like the retention rate or like the call it the metric. It's just like how long someone watches, right? I would say that that percentage is so high compared to like other platforms where like YouTube and people are like constantly clicking to different. Sorry, I'm gonna put this pen down. They're constantly skipping to like different videos or like on Instagram where it format content pieces. Podcast is just really great because you can really build connection with people because they're listening to what you're saying and you can share whatever message you want, which I just want to just really quickly encourage people out there who have a message. It's the barrier to entry, like being able to just launch your own podcast and talk about what you want to talk about, share whatever message. What a blessing to be living during this time where we have that opportunity and that access. So that's a little bit about the why I started my podcast in terms of the topics. So very much focused on spirituality, manifestation, law of attraction, other universal laws. I feel like law of attraction gets the most attention, but there are other universal laws. And then overall, though, I would say it's like personal development. I say it's personal development on another wavelength because it's not like just the traditional motivation, inspiration, personal development. It's a lot deeper than that. It's doing that inner work that I think is so important.
What are some similar podcasts out there, or ones that you listen to that you could that you're inspired by to influence your podcast?
Yeah, so I really like Catherine Zinkina. She is known as the Manifestation Babe. I follow her podcast and Sahara Rose. For me, I really like books. I so some of the books that I really like, Change Your. Let's see if I have it in here. Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor. He passed away last year. His son released a book. My Father Knew the Secret. I also really like that one. That's my most recent read. U Squared by Price. I think it's Pritchett. Um, and let's see, the subconscious mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. I'm just listing out some books here in case it resonates with people who are listening. Ask and It Is Given by Esther Hicks. Let's see, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. All of her books I've read. So The Secret, The Magic, The Power. I think there's so much wisdom in books. I do like podcasts too. Sometimes I'll, listen to podcasts when I'm doing the dishes or doing something, but I really like having like a physical book to read. So yeah, those are just some of my recommendations. Some of the books that I read at the beginning of my journey that really shifted things for me, helped me see myself differently, helped me to see the world differently.
Now, this is a question. I don't know if you've ever been asked before, but I to ask Vietnamese American. So for yourself, what does being Vietnamese mean to you?
Mm, it's a really good question. And I do think to give an answer that does a question justice, I'd I'd need to really sit and reflect on that. But if I stop to think about like what are the things that I learned from my parents or what do I see as like common among Vietnamese people, I would say a really strong work ethic and just being able to adapt to like different situations. My parents have experience in so many different things. Um, and I think it's because, they had to be adaptable. They had to make ends meet and they were willing to do whatever it took. So I think that adaptability, the resiliency, I think also it's like the scrappiness. I can't think of another word, but just like being scrappy. I feel like I see that in myself. I see that a lot when I'm learning something new. If I think back to my different jobs and the different companies that I worked at, I feel like I was pretty scrappy. And I feel like I got that from my parents. So I would say those things. I remember for Mrs. World, we all had to bring a gift to the owners of the hotel. So the pageant was hosted at Westgate. And so all of the contestants had to bring a gift. And the gift I brought, it was a mural. And I can't remember exactly, I can't describe the picture to the T, but it was like a woman working in the field. And I remember I saw that picture and I loved it because it reminded me of my mom. And when I presented it, I just talked about how, this represents, how hardworking we are as Vietnamese people. And yeah, I would say just being a hard worker and putting family first. I think that's very common among Vietnamese people.
This is a question I never asked, but I'm just because we've been talking so much about pageantry. I feel like you're the right person to answer this question, and you representing Vietnamese women. With the with fashion kind of taking shape and also being more what's the word globalized, right? The most staple for the our Vietnamese culture, the ao dai is our identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's arguments of ones that are elevating it, taking it to avant-garde, others that are making it more fast casual. But for a Vietnamese woman yourself, what does the ao dai mean to you? And like, what do you feel it makes it so special for the
Mm.
Vietnamese people?
I remember I posted, and ooh, I'm gonna have to try to make this as concise as possible. Um, I remember posting on my Facebook when maybe I was in college. I don't know. It was a long time ago where I said, I just love the white ao dai. There's something so feminine and elegant about it.
That's the
And
first that comes to mind. Usually, it's
mm,
because it's what you wear, I believe, in school, and it's like
mhm.
it's classic, classic,
It's actually
classic.
what I wore a white ao dai for my interviews at Mrs. World. I feel like it's so beautiful. It's so simple and so elegant, but so beautiful. Whenever I wear an ao dai, whenever I get an opportunity to, I feel so feminine. I feel so, it makes me feel so pretty wearing an ao dai. I think it's so special because, again, it's that simplicity. Of course, like you said, there are so many different types of ao dai now, which is really cool to see. But I think for me personally, I really like that simple, elegant style.
There's this modest uh, conservativeness, but like at the same time, it's form fitting, right? So it's
Form fitting. Ooh,
yeah.
that's a good description. Form fitting.
I know you got to run, but I really appreciate your our talk today. We could probably have gone on a little bit longer, but for those who are listening, make sure you guys check out Jennifer Lay on and check her out on Spotify. Her show's called The Manifestment. It's a great show um, to listen, even listen in the car or to when you need some good perspective on
Need
things.
a little inspiration.
Mhm. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely be in touch, and we'll have this conversation again soon.
Thank you so much, Johnny.